December 1942, Chesil Beach, England. A 55-year-old civilian engineer watches his invention, a bomb he designed in his backyard using his daughter's marbles, explode on impact with the ocean. It disintegrates, complete failure. Behind him, military officials shake their heads. The chairman of his own company has just ordered him to stop making a nuisance of yourself and drop this ridiculous idea. The head of Bomber Command calls his work tripe of the wildest description. This man, Barnes Wallis, has no military rank, no government budget, no official approval. He's working nights after his regular job, funding experiments with his own money, risking his career on an idea everyone says is impossible. But in 5 months, this ridiculous idea will destroy 2 massive Nazi dams, cripple Germany's industrial heartland, and change the course of World War II. Except here's what nobody tells you. Barnes Wallis didn't invent a new weapon. He reinvented a 200-year-old naval technique using physics, backyard experiments, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. And the weapon he created, it was made from scrap metal, dropped from modified bombers by pilots flying 60 feet above water at night, dodging anti-aircraft fire. If you want to know how one civilian engineer, rejected, ridiculed, and nearly fired, built the weapon that Nazi Germany never saw coming, stay with me. Because this story isn't about genius, it's about what happens when someone refuses to accept impossible as an answer. September 1939. War breaks out across Europe. Barnes Wallis is assistant chief designer at Vickers Armstrong Aircraft Company. He's already famous in engineering circles for designing the R-100 airship and the Wellington bomber with its revolutionary geodetic airframe, a lattice structure so strong that Wellingtons could fly home with half their fuselage shot away. But Wallis has a problem. Actually, Britain has a problem. Germany's war machine runs on power from the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. Factories producing tanks, ammunition, aircraft, all powered by massive hydroelectric dams. The Möhne, the Eder, the Sorpe. These aren't normal dams. The Möhne Dam is 130 feet tall, 112 feet thick at the base. It holds back 140 million tons of water. Behind its wall sits enough energy to power the entire Ruhr industrial complex. The British Air Ministry knows if they could destroy these dams, they could cripple German industry, flood factories, cut power, knock Germany out of the war faster, and save countless lives. But here's the problem. Nobody knows how to do it. A conventional bomb dropped from altitude? You'd need a direct hit within 50 feet of the dam wall. In 1941, less than 10% of bombs were falling within 5 miles of their targets. The math doesn't work. A massive bomb that could crack the dam from near misses? Calculations show you'd need a 60,000-pound bomb. The largest British bomb in production is 1,000 pounds. And even if you built a 60,000-pound bomb, no aircraft exists that could carry it. Torpedoes? The Germans already thought of that. They've installed anti-torpedo nets in the water 100 feet from every dam wall. In July 1941, the Air Attack on Dams Committee concludes, an attack on the Möhne Dam is impracticable with existing weapons. Case closed. Move on. But Barnes Wallis doesn't move on, because Wallis is what engineers call a first principles thinker. Instead of asking, how do we drop a bigger bomb, he asks a different question. What's the minimum amount of explosive needed if we place it in exactly the right spot? And he realizes something. If you could detonate explosive in contact with the dam wall, underwater, the physics change completely. The water pressure would amplify the blast. Instead of needing 60,000 pounds of explosive dropped from above, you'd only need 6,000 pounds detonated against the wall, underwater. The problem is getting the explosive there. Torpedoes won't work because of the nets. Dropping a bomb precisely enough is impossible with 1941 technology. But Wallis remembers something from naval history, something the British Royal Navy used 200 years ago. In the Napoleonic Wars, Admiral Lord Nelson's ships would skip cannonballs across the water to hit enemy vessels below the waterline. The cannonballs would bounce like stones across a pond, traveling farther and hitting at unpredictable angles. What if, and this is where everyone thinks Wallis has lost his mind, what if you could skip a bomb across the water, over the torpedo nets, right up against the dam wall? Wallis starts doing calculations. He reads obscure German physics papers from the early 1900s about ricocheting solid objects off water. He discovers something called the Magnus effect. If you spin an object backward while it bounces, the spin creates aerodynamic lift, extending its range. In early 1942, Wallis begins experiments in his backyard, using a small catapult, shooting his daughter's marbles across a bathtub full of water. His neighbors think he's having a nervous breakdown, but Wallis is discovering something revolutionary. The marbles need to be launched at a 7-degree angle. The backspin is critical. Dimpled surfaces like golf balls bounce more effectively than smooth ones. He scales up, builds a larger catapult, tests different materials on a nearby lake: balsa wood, aluminum, steel, lead, each engraved with different surface patterns. By September 1942, Wallis has a theory. A spherical bomb, dropped from a low-flying aircraft, spinning backward at 500 RPM, could skip across water, jump over torpedo nets, and slam into a dam wall. He writes a paper, Air Attack on Dams. He submits it to the Air Ministry, to politicians, to anyone who will listen, and everyone tells him the same thing. It's impossible. The Ministry of Aircraft Production says Britain doesn't have resources for wild experiments. His own boss at Vickers tells him to stop wasting time. The head of Bomber Command, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Bomber Harris, a man not known for mincing words, reads Wallis's proposal and writes a one-sentence response, tripe of the wildest description. But Wallis has one advantage. He's stubborn to the point of insanity. When his chairman at Vickers orders him to drop the project, Wallis does something extraordinary. He offers to resign, to work on the project anyway, on his own time, with his own money. And then he gets lucky, because one person believes in him. Group Captain Frederick Winterbotham, an intelligence officer, sees Wallis's proposal and thinks it might just be crazy enough to work. Winterbotham makes sure the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Charles Portal, sees Wallis's paper. More importantly, he makes sure Portal sees the films of Wallis's backyard tests. Portal watches the footage. He sees the physics work. And on January 28, 1943, he orders full-scale testing. This is where things get real. Wallis's team builds full-size prototype bombs, spherical 4 feet 6 inches in diameter, weighing nearly 10,000 pounds when loaded with explosive. They're designed to be dropped from Wellington bombers, modified to carry them. The test site, Chesil Beach in Dorset, a remote stretch of coastline where the military can conduct experiments away from prying eyes. December 1942, first test drop. The Wellington bomber, serial number BJ895G, descends over Chesil Beach. Captain Mutt Summers is at the controls. Cameras on the beach record everything. The bomb drops, spinning backward, heading for the water. It hits the surface and disintegrates, explodes into fragments on impact. Complete failure. Wallis rows out in a small boat at low tide to inspect the pieces. He makes modifications to the casing, reinforces the shell, adjusts the spin rate. January 1943, second test. Same result. The bomb shatters on impact. Wallis spends nights redesigning. Each test costs thousands of pounds, money that could be spent on conventional weapons that actually work. The pressure is enormous. His employers want him to stop. The Air Ministry is losing patience, but Wallis notices something in the wreckage. The bombs are failing because they're hitting the water at too steep an angle, too fast. The casings can't handle the impact force. He modifies the design again, strengthens the outer shell with high tensile steel, adjusts the drop height and speed parameters. February 5, 1943. Another test at Chesil Beach. This time the bomb bounces. Once, twice, 3 times. It travels over 1,300 yards across the water and, critically, remains intact. Wallis has done it. But here's the problem. The spherical design is inefficient. It's difficult to manufacture. The spin mechanism is unreliable, and testing reveals another issue. The spheres are too unpredictable. Sometimes they bounce perfectly. Sometimes they veer off course. So Wallis does something that seems insane. He scraps the spherical design and starts over. In March 1943, just 2 months before the planned raid, Wallis switches to a cylindrical design, a rotating drum, 4 feet long, 50 inches in diameter. It looks like a massive rolling pin. This new design, codenamed Upkeep, has to be tested from scratch. The test site moves to Reculver on the Thames estuary in Kent, easier to secure than Chesil Beach. and now they're testing from Lancaster bombers, the only aircraft powerful enough to carry the weapon to Germany. April 13, 1943. First test of the cylindrical upkeep at Reculver. Disaster. The bombs disintegrate on impact. Again. Wallis wades out into the surf, examining fragments in the shallow water. He's 55 years old, standing in freezing water, picking up pieces of his broken dream. And he realizes the problem. They're dropping from too high. The original plan called for dropping upkeep at 150 feet altitude, but the tests show it needs to be released at 60 feet, barely above the water, or the impact force will destroy it. 60 feet. At night. Over enemy territory. Under anti-aircraft fire. Wallis knows this will increase casualties. He knows he's asking pilots to fly lower than any previous bombing mission. He knows some won't come back, but he also knows it's the only way the weapon will work. The final test parameters: 60 feet altitude, 220 swans mph ground speed, 500 RPM backspin on the bomb. More tests, more failures, more modifications. May 12, 1943. Final test at Reculver, just days before the scheduled raid. Flight Lieutenant David Shannon drops upkeep from his Lancaster. Height correct, speed correct. But his bomb aimer misjudges and releases 40 yards too early. The bomb falls short, doesn't reach shore. Another crew, Flight Lieutenant Les Munro, flies too low. The bomb's impact splash damages the fuselage. This is it. The mission is scheduled in 4 days, and the tests are still failing. But Wallis has enough successful drops to prove the concept works. Barely, if everything goes perfectly, which it won't, because nothing in war goes perfectly. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, and you want to see how this impossible weapon performs in actual combat, leave a comment right now telling me what other impossible WWII invention you want me to cover next. It helps the algorithm show this to more history fans, and hit that subscribe button because we're about to get to the part where everything goes wrong. May 16th, 1943. RAF Scampton, England. Barnes Wallis stands in front of 133 airmen, the crews of 617 Squadron, led by Wing Commander Guy Gibson. These men still don't know their target. Security has been so tight that even the pilots don't know what they're attacking. Wallis gives the final briefing. He explains the weapon, shows them films of the tests, describes exactly how upkeep works. The backspin, the bouncing, the underwater detonation. Then he shows them photographs of the dams. The room goes silent, because these men realize they're about to attempt something that has never been done before. Flying 60 feet above water, in the dark, at 220 mph, through German air defenses, to drop a spinning bomb that might disintegrate on impact. 19 Lancaster bombers are prepared. Each has been modified. Mid-upper gun turret removed to reduce drag and save weight. Bomb bay doors removed to accommodate upkeep hanging partially below the fuselage. Each upkeep bomb weighs 9,250 pounds, packed with 6,600 pounds of Torpex explosive, 50% more powerful than TNT. The mission is simple in theory, impossible in practice. Fly 400 miles to Germany. Navigate at night using only landmarks. Descend to exactly 60 feet above the water. Accelerate to exactly 220 mph. Line up perpendicular to the dam wall. Release upkeep at precisely the right moment. Watch it bounce across the reservoir over the torpedo nets, slam into the dam wall, sink 30 feet down and detonate, all while German anti-aircraft guns shoot at you. Oh, and one more thing, the height measurement system. Because barometric altimeters aren't accurate enough at low altitude, Wallis devised a brilliantly simple solution. 2 spotlights, one mounted under the nose, one under the fuselage. When both beams converge on the water surface, the aircraft is at exactly 60 feet. It's ingenious. It's also a death sentence because those spotlights make the Lancasters visible for miles. 9:30 p.m. The bombers take off. The first wave, 9 aircraft, heads for the Möhne Dam, the primary target, the most heavily defended. The second wave, 5 aircraft, will attack the Eder Dam. The third wave, 5 reserve aircraft, will attack the Sorpe Dam or serve as backups. Barnes Wallis stays behind at Scampton, listening to radio transmissions, and immediately, things start going wrong. 11:20 p.m. Lancaster AJE, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Barlow, is hit by flak over the Netherlands. It crashes, all 7 crew members killed. The upkeep bomb survives intact. The Germans recover it. 11:30 p.m. Lancaster AJB, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Astle, flies into power lines near the German border. Crashes, crew killed. Midnight. Lancaster AJK, piloted by Pilot Officer Byers, is shot down by flak. Crew killed. 3 bombers lost before even reaching the target. But the remaining aircraft press on. 12:28 a.m., May 17th. Wing Commander Gibson's Lancaster arrives at the Möhne Dam. In the moonlight, he sees it. A massive concrete wall, 130 feet tall, stretching 2,100 feet across the valley. Behind it, 140 million tons of water. On top, anti-aircraft gun towers. Gibson makes his approach. Descending to 60 feet, the spotlights converge on the water, speed building to 220 mph. The flak towers open fire. Tracer rounds arc toward him. The Lancaster shudders from near misses. At 1,400 feet from the dam, Gibson's bomb aimer releases upkeep. The bomb drops. Spinning backward at 500 RPM, it hits the water and bounces. Once, twice, 3 times. Skipping across the reservoir like a stone, it clears the torpedo nets, slams into the dam wall, sinks. 30 seconds later, detonation. A massive column of water erupts 1,000 feet into the air. Gibson circles back. The dam is damaged, but holds. 12:40 a.m. Flight Lieutenant Hoppy Hopgood makes his run, but his Lancaster is hit by flak on approach. The aircraft is on fire. He releases upkeep late. It overshoots the dam, detonates on the power station below. Hopgood's crippled Lancaster crashes. Only 2 crew members survive. 12:49 a.m. Flight Lieutenant Martin's turn. Under intense flak, he releases perfectly. Upkeep bounces, hits the wall, detonates. Still, the dam holds. 12:56 a.m. Squadron leader. Dinghy. Young attacks. Perfect drop. Perfect. Detonation. The dam wall shows cracks, but it doesn't break. 1:02 a.m. Flight Lieutenant Maltby makes his run. This is the 5th attack. The Germans know exactly what the British are trying to do now. The flak is murderous. Maltby's bomb aimer releases upkeep. It bounces perfectly. Slams into the exact same spot the previous bombs hit. Detonation. For 10 seconds, nothing happens. Then, the Möhne Dam breaks. A section 250 feet wide collapses. 140 million tons of water explode through the breach. A tidal wave 30 feet high roars down the valley at 20 miles per hour. Factories flood. Power stations drown. Villages disappear. But there's no time to celebrate, because the Eder Dam is still intact, and that's 40 miles away. 1:39 a.m. Gibson leads 5 Lancasters to the Eder. This target is worse. The dam sits in a narrow valley. To attack it, the Lancasters must dive between hills, descend to 60 feet, level off and release, all in the space of seconds. Squadron leader Shannon makes 3 attempts. Each time, he can't line up properly. Pulls away. Finally, on his 4th run, he drops upkeep. It bounces, hits the dam, detonates. No breach. Flight Lieutenant Maudsley attacks. But something goes wrong. His bomb releases late, hits the dam parapet, detonates prematurely. The blast damages his Lancaster. He tries to fly home but is shot down over Germany. All crew killed. 2:54 a.m. Pilot Officer Les Knight makes his run. This is the last upkeep available for the Eder. If this fails, the mission fails. Knight's bomb aimer releases perfectly. The bomb bounces 7 times. Slams into the dam wall, dead center, detonation, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Then the Eder Dam explodes, a breach 230 feet wide. Another 202 million tons of water cascade into the valley. 2 dams destroyed. Mission accomplished. But the cost is brutal. Of 19 Lancasters that took off, 8 never return. 53 aircrew killed, 3 captured, for 2 dams. Barnes Wallis waits at RAF Scampton through the night, listening to reports. When the final aircraft land at dawn, he knows the success. 2 dams breached, and he knows the cost. 53 young men dead. For the rest of his life, Wallis will be haunted by those deaths. Here's what the dam breaches accomplished. Immediate damage. 1,600 civilians killed in the flooding, including approximately 1,000 slave laborers and prisoners. 11 factories destroyed. 17 bridges washed away. 3 power stations knocked out. Longer-term effects. 3,000 German workers diverted from the Atlantic Wall construction to repair the dams. Steel and concrete pulled from other projects. Resources that could have gone to tank production or bunker construction instead spent rebuilding dams. Did it shorten the war? Historians debate this. The dams were repaired within months. German war production barely slowed, but it accomplished something else. It proved that precision attacks on strategic targets could work. It demonstrated that innovative weapons could solve impossible problems. It showed that civilian engineers could contribute directly to military victory. And it terrified Germany. Because if the British could destroy dams, what else could they destroy? After the raids, Wallis returned to his other designs. His earthquake bombs, the ones the Air Ministry had rejected as too large. With the success of the bouncing bomb, the ministry suddenly became interested. Wallis designed the Tall Boy, a 12,000-pound bomb, 21 feet long, designed to break the sound barrier as it fell and burrow deep underground before exploding. Then the Grand Slam, 22,000 pounds, the largest bomb used in WWII. These weapons destroyed the German battleship Tirpitz, V-rocket launching sites, railway tunnels and viaducts, U-boat pens with 20-foot thick concrete roofs. Everything the bouncing bomb proved, that precision weapons designed by civilians could win wars, applied to these earthquake bombs. But here's what nobody tells you about Barnes Wallis. He was awarded $10,000 for his war work, a fortune in 1943, equivalent to nearly $2 million today. He donated every penny to Christ's Hospital School to establish the RAF Foundationers Trust, a fund to educate children of RAF personnel killed or injured in action. When asked why, Wallis quoted 2 Samuel from the Bible, the passage where King David's men risked their lives to bring him water from a well behind enemy lines, and David refused to drink it, instead pouring it out as an offering, saying, "Is this not the blood of men who went in jeopardy of their lives?" Wallis believed the credit for destroying the dams belonged to the aircrew who died, not to him. He refused to profit from their sacrifice. For the rest of his life, Wallis worked on advanced aircraft designs, swing-wing aircraft, hypersonic designs that could fly 5 times the speed of sound. Most were never built, because Wallis was always 20 years ahead of his time. He died in 1979, at age 91. His obituaries called him the man who breached the dams, but that misses the point. Barnes Wallis was the man who proved that one civilian, armed with nothing but physics, stubbornness, and a daughter's marbles, could change the course of history. Today, there are memorials to the dam busters all over Britain and Germany. The Möhne and Eder dams were rebuilt after the war. They still stand today. In Chesil Beach, where Wallis tested his failed prototypes, there's a small memorial plaque. Most people walk past it without noticing, but that's fitting, because Barnes Wallis never wanted fame. He wanted to save lives by shortening the war, and whether he succeeded, whether the dams raid truly mattered strategically, historians still argue. But here's what we know for certain. One civilian engineer, rejected by his employers, ridiculed by military command, working nights with his own money, created a weapon that accomplished something everyone said was impossible. Not because he was smarter than everyone else, but because he refused to accept impossible as an answer. The next time someone tells you an idea won't work, remember Barnes Wallis standing in freezing water at Chesil Beach, picking up fragments of his failed bombs and redesigning them anyway. If this story inspired you, if you think more people need to hear about the civilians who won World War II from their drawing boards and backyard experiments, subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that impossible just means nobody's figured it out yet. And leave a comment. What other unknown WWII hero should I cover next? Because Barnes Wallis proved something important. Wars aren't just won by soldiers. They're won by stubborn civilians who refuse to quit when everyone says it can't be done. The bomb that bounced. The civilian who wouldn't quit. The night 53 men died to prove the impossible was possible. That's the story they don't teach in school. But it's the one that matters most.